Meteorology. Today's video is Vlogoween day... Shit, I've lost count. 9? 10. Today's video is an episode of Vlogoween, and I have no idea what day I'm on. It's either day 9 or day 10. It'll be in the title of the video, whatever the correct day is. And today I am tackling something that I battle every single year, and that is the beloved caramel apple. Every year I make caramel apples without fail. I usually only make them once a year, right around Halloween time. Sometimes I make them twice a year, but without fail at least once a year. Every single year without fail, my caramel slides off and ends up in a big puddle stuck to the wax paper, without fail. And on top of that, sometimes there's like this slobberiness. It gets kind of juicy in there. There's moisture from somewhere, and it's like wet caramel, and so it's not pretty. They taste really good, but they're just not really pretty. This year, I have decided to figure out this caramel apple thing, because some people can make beautiful caramel apples. You can buy them in the store and they look perfect, and they don't have the big puddle of caramel stuck to wax paper. I never knew how people did it. Mine always came out ugly, and this year I am determined to figure out how to make pretty caramel apples. So what I did was a lot of research, really. I have compiled every single tip that I could find on how to make the perfect caramel apple. I looked at so many different caramel apple recipes and blogs where people had made them, and just comments and just all kinds of stuff. And I have compiled everything that I have found, and today I'm going to attempt to make the perfect caramel apple. And I'm really gonna hope that my fucking caramel doesn't slide off like it does every other year. So, I have Gala apples, and I have 2 Granny Smith. We don't really like Granny Smith apples. Look, I'm having a crazy hair day today. Oh my God. Having issues today. So I have 2 Granny Smith apples. We don't really care for Granny Smith apples, although I do like them when they have caramel on them. But we tend to eat Gala apples, Pink Lady, Red Delicious, most of the red apples. So I have mostly Gala apples that I'll be using today, but I do have 2 Granny Smiths. I don't really think that's going to make any difference. I think there are other scientific factors that need to happen in order to ensure the perfect caramel apple. I don't necessarily think the kind of apple you use makes any difference whatsoever. In all of my reading, and I spent a lot of time researching this, like seriously probably a stupid amount of time researching caramel apples. Never once did I see anything about the kind of apple that you use. So it's really a matter of taste and preference as to what kind of apples you use, but there are other factors that go into making the perfect caramel apple. I think one of the important factors from what I have read is the kind of caramel that you choose. Sometimes not such great caramel can lead to not such great results with your caramel apples. In my opinion, homemade caramel is probably the best. Caramel can be a little tricky. It takes time. You can't rush through caramel. And because I can't turn my stove down low enough, I'm just going to use the packaged caramels. However, I did keep seeing over and over and over again people reference Peter's caramel, and it comes in a big ass block. Like, do y'all remember gum mint cheese? Like, I had gum mint cheese growing up, and it was this big ass fucking block of cheddar cheese, and you could like hack a chunk of the cheese off of the block. That's what this caramel reminds me of. It's like a 6-pound block of caramel, and it's called Peter's caramel. I saw that reference so many times. People rave about that shit. I've never tried it, so I can't really say, but a lot of people seem to like it. The caramel wraps did not get a great review. I've never used those, but I can tell you I don't like a lot of processed stuff, so I probably would not like them. And people did say that they were not great. They didn't taste good, they were sticky, sometimes they were a pain in the ass, you couldn't get it to wrap very well. So there were several issues with the caramel wraps. If you decide to go the caramel wrap route, I'm sure these tips will still be helpful to you, but I think the wraps are kind of designed to eliminate some of these problems because they just kind of stick to themselves and it doesn't melt. It's not melty caramel. So the kind of caramel you use is very important. In my opinion, homemade caramel is probably the best. From what I've read, the Peter's caramel has rave reviews. I am just using the craft caramels. Dudes, this was the last 2 bags of caramels in the whole damn commissary. I'm so lucky I even got these. Had I not found these, I would have had to attempt to make my own caramel, and I'm just gonna guess that that would not have been pretty, and I would have been pretty pissed off. So, I'm just using the craft caramels. This is an 11-ounce bag. I have a pot of water here on the stove, and I'm bringing it up to a boil. You can see right around the edges there, it's just starting to bubble a little bit, so I'm gonna turn the water off because what you need to do is get the wax off of the apples. They have this waxy coating, as you know, and you have to get that off because if you don't get the waxy coating off, your caramel is absolutely going to slide right back off. Now, some of the websites that I found said that you could wash them with dish soap. I don't see how dish soap is actually going to take the wax off. So everything else that I saw said you put them in hot water, not boiling water. So you can see it was just starting to bubble a little bit. It's steaming quite a bit, but I've turned it off and I'm actually letting it cool down a tiny bit. You don't want it so hot that it's going to start to cook your apples or mess up the skin as soon as you put it in there. Your skin can turn a little bit brown, especially if your water's too hot. So you want to try to avoid that. You want really hot water, hot enough to melt the wax, but not hot enough to cook the skin or start to cook the apple. So what you want to do is wash the apple, and it shouldn't take but just a couple of seconds in the really hot water. You need to get the wax off. So this is super hot and I don't want to burn myself. And my pan is not very deep, but I'm doing the best that I can. You want to give it a feel. I can still feel the wax on there. So yeah, it needs to, that's not going to work. I mean, the washing will work, but that short amount of time was not enough. I think you really have to be able to get in here and scrub the apple and maybe hold it in the water as you do. Oh, I'm making a big mess. You have to be able to get the wax off. And I can see that there's still wax on here because the water's like beating up. Maybe once the water stops beating up, you know you've got the wax off. Hot. It's so fucking hot. All right. I think that one's good. So I'm going to wash all of my apples in this really super hot water, and then I'll be back to show you the next step. Look, I don't know if you can see that on camera, but that's actually really disgusting. It makes me kind of want to boil my apples just before eating them on a regular day. That's gross. Let me see if I can feel. Oh, there's no wax on there. No wax. You want to make sure you dry them completely. Make sure you get in all the little nooks and crannies. Nooks and grannies. All right, they're all dry. Now, if you can see this one turned a little tiny bit browner. Browner? More brown? It's a little darker. It's a little darker than the others, but that's okay. It's going to be covered in caramel, so I don't really care if they turn a little bit brown. Now from this point, you may actually be all right. You may be able to put your caramel on your apples and it won't slide off if you've gotten all the wax off of the apples and if they're dried completely. However, I really want to ensure that my caramel stays on my apples. Like I said, I am aiming for the perfect caramel apple. So the next genius tip that I found was to actually lightly sand your apples. Now, every website that I read suggested using fine grit sandpaper. I couldn't find sandpaper here that was fine enough because it's really important that you do not pierce the skin of the apples. So what I did was pick up one of these little 3-sided fingernail files, fingernail buffer file things. So it's got a really coarse grit, then a medium grit, and then a super fine grit. And I'm going to start with this super fine side, and you just want to buff the apples. I want to see if this is going to work. If it doesn't, then I'll flip to another coarseness. Actually, let me start with this one. Oh yeah, this one's good. The most rough side seems to be just fine. So if there is any wax left on your apple, it should come off. I don't think that's wax. I think it's just where I'm sanding the apple. So if there is any wax left, it should come off when you're sanding. And this roughs up the skin a little bit, which gives the caramel something to stick to. You know, in my artist brain, I associate that with like gesso. Your canvas or your substrate needs some tooth for the paint to stick to. So I kind of equate sanding the apple with the same as, you know, putting gesso on your canvas. It gives the caramel something to stick to instead of just that slick ass apple. So I'm going to sand all of my apples. And you can see I'm being very careful. It's very important that you do not pierce the skin, because if you pierce the skin, then you're going to have juice leakage, and juice leakage is never good, girls. And if if your apple starts to have some juice leakage, then obviously your apple is going to be wet and slimy. And caramel apples is the one time when wet and slimy is not a good thing. Well, slimy is never a good thing, but you know, wet and slippery. Wet and slippery is not a good thing for caramel apples. In other aspects, it's perfect, it's great. We love wet and slippery. Not so much with caramel apples. So, do not pierce the skin as you're sanding your apples. I also wanted to say quickly that I went and bought this fingernail file specifically for my caramel apples. This is a brand new file, and I also washed it with hot soapy water because I wanted to make sure that there's nothing, no germs, no dirt, nobody else's dirty grubby hands on here, because you're scraping this skin, which means you're getting into the fruit a little bit, and any germs that are on this are going to get into your fruit. So I recommend buying a new file that you're only going to use for this, and also washing it with nice hot soapy water before you begin. They're washed, they're sanded, they're rinsed again, and then dried completely. Remember, slippery and wet is not good for caramel apples, so make sure you dry them completely. Now the next step is to add your stick. Most people use popsicle sticks or those little sucker, the white candy sucker sticks. I can't find either one of those here in Sicily, so I'm using bamboo skewers. And I think these are actually too small. I don't think that's going to give me anything substantial really to hold my apple with. So I'm going to use 2 per apple, I think. Okay. You want to make sure that you put your sticks in nice and firmly, because loose sticks are bad, bad, bad. You don't want to be caramelling your apple and then the stick to fall out, because that's just going to piss you off. So you want to make sure the stick is in there nice and firm, and you want to make sure your stick is big enough to hold on to. So like I said, one of these would probably not have been substantial enough. Awesome, my sticks are in place, so now what I'm going to do is put these in the refrigerator and let them chill for about 30 minutes. I'm going to leave them in there the whole time I'm heating up my caramel. When you put your apples in the refrigerator, it chills them, which makes the caramel set a little bit quicker. When the apples are cold, it helps to set the caramel a little bit quicker, which also helps to prevent it from sliding back off. So I'm gonna stick these on a tray, put them in my refrigerator for about 30 minutes. And while these are in the fridge, I'm gonna start working on my caramels. I'm getting ready to start melting my caramels down, but before I do that, I wanna prepare the surface that my apples will go onto. So in the past, I've always used wax paper. That's what I've always seen people use, is wax paper. I did discover that wax paper is a really bad idea. Not only does oh my God, dudes, I'm having such a crazy hair day today. Anyway, the caramel sticks to the wax paper worse than almost anything. You're not supposed to use wax paper. You're not supposed to use aluminum foil because the caramel just like permanently attaches itself to that shit and it will not come off. So when you pull your apple off, you're actually pulling a chunk of the wax paper with you. And then you're picking wax paper bits out of your damn apple the whole time. So parchment paper is supposedly better than wax paper. I haven't tried parchment paper, so I can't judge. However, brilliant tip was to use a Silpat mat. So I have my Silpat mat on a flat cookie sheet and it's ready to go. So it's sitting here. So as soon as I dip my caramel apples, once they're ready to be set down, I will sit them on my Silpat mat and see how that works. Now that the apples are in the refrigerator chilling, I'm gonna start working on the caramels. One of the most brilliant tips, actually all of these are brilliant tips, but one of the things that I read was to use a cast iron skillet to heat your caramels because the cast iron heats evenly and it also retains the heat once you take the caramels off the fire. So using a cast iron pot, actually they recommend a cast iron stock pot, which I don't have here. All I have here is my cast iron skillet. So I'm hoping that's gonna work. But using cast iron is a way to ensure that the caramel heats evenly and that the heat retains, which allows the caramel to stay warm for longer. And also, I read a couple of places that recommended using the cast iron but heating in the oven on the lowest setting. You can do it on the stove top like I'm gonna do here, but if you were able to use a cast iron stock pot in the oven on the lowest setting, it would also be an option. So I'm gonna turn my stove on to the lowest setting, and that may still be too high because my burner might go out, because that's just my stove here in Sicily. Now I'm gonna add my caramels. This is one full bag, an 11-ounce bag of caramels. And the bag says to use 2 tablespoons of water. You need to heat the caramels slowly. Don't be tempted to turn the temperature way up and heat them quicker because your caramel will burn. But you need to heat them slowly and you need to stir it constantly. And I know it probably seems silly to stir it right here in the beginning because they're still rock hard. But you can already see that my water's turning a little bit milky. That's because the caramels are actually already melting. So don't be tempted to turn the heat up and try to cook them quicker. Just put it on low and let them do their thing. It's not a fast process. My caramels have been heating up for about 5 minutes, and in the beginning they're going to heat fairly slowly. They're going to melt slowly, but as more of it melts, that's going to cause them to melt even faster. They're smaller, there's more liquid surrounding them. So you can see I can start to like spread it out. And I'm at 5 minutes right now. Well, about 6 minutes right now. Also, as you're heating your caramels, you want to make sure that you're scraping the bottom and the sides of your pan. And if you have any caramel stuck, do not, under any circumstances, do this to get the caramel off of your spoon. Do not use your finger because this is like molten lava. It will burn the shit out of you. So do not scrape your spoon with your finger to get the stuck caramels off of your spoon. They will come off. Your spoon's gonna get hot enough, they will come off. If it really bugs you, use another spoon and scrape it off. And back and forth, scrape it into the pan. But do not, under any circumstances, use your finger to try and edge that caramel off of the spoon and into the pan. It will come off. So just keep scraping the sides, and you can see, like, even in just a couple minutes that I've been talking, how much they've melted down now that they're getting nice and hot and soft. You want to start spreading them and smearing that caramel so that it can melt even faster. Anytime you see like a little bubbly bit, you want to give that a good stir as well. You do not want it to boil, because if it boils, it's going to burn. And it'll lose its flavor, and it'll either become brittle or gritty. I don't know. It's bad. So just keep it very low and very slow. Keep scraping the sides. Keep scraping the bottom. And mashing and spreading your caramels as you go. So I'm going to let these, see how that just melted right off the spoon? So I'm just going to let these melt down for another minute or two, and then I'll be back for the next step. Look at that! Oh my god, that looks so good. Delicious! So you can see my caramels have fully melted. They're nice and liquidy. My caramel is not boiling. You don't ever want it to get to the point where it's boiling or even bubbling. And I've just scraped down the sides, scraped across the bottom, and just kept it moving the whole time. It took about, I don't know, 10 or 11 minutes to get to this point. So now what I'm going to do is turn my caramel off and let it sit here for 3 or 4 minutes. Less than 5 minutes, but you know, a good couple of minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, to just cool down a little bit, because right now it's so hot, it's literally gonna melt right back off of the apples. So that's always been a problem for me as well. I've literally either kept the burner on to keep the caramel soft, or I've turned the burner off and immediately started putting the caramel on top of my apples. So a great tip that I discovered was to turn the heat off and let the caramel cool down for 3 or 4 minutes before you start to put it on the apples. And if you're using cast iron, that's another reason that's recommended, is that it's going to retain the heat but not the fire. So it will cool slightly but still stay warm, which is going to help keep your caramel nice and melted and give you a little bit longer to put it on the apples without it being so hot. So I'm going to let this sit for 3 or 4 minutes. I'm also going to pull my apples out of the refrigerator right now to give them a couple of minutes to acclimate back to the room, because they're going to sweat a little bit when you first start to take them out, and you don't want to take them out so early that they really start to sweat, but you want to let that initial sweat start to happen so that you can dry them back off. My caramel's been sitting for a couple minutes, and when I stir, you're going to see there's like a skin. It's a little bit thicker. It's not quite as liquidy, which is good, because hopefully it won't be so hot it's going to slide right back off the apple. So now what I'm going to do is sit my apple down into the caramel and then use a spoon to kind of pour the caramel over the top. This is going to help the caramel go on nice and smoothly. And once I get it completely covered, I'm going to pick it up and let it drip. Now, in the past, I would keep scooping caramel. Like, oh, I'm trying to turn my stove on even higher. Or turn it on again. In the past, I would scoop more caramel up on top of here, because I always felt like all the caramel sliding back off. I have to put more back on top. That is not true. You want it to drip as much as possible, and then you want to completely scrape the bottom of it off. You're still going to have a little bit of drippage, and it's going to run down there and cover that up, but you want to scrape the bottom, and then you want to flip it upside down and count to 20. Oh, you can't see that. So it was in the pan like this. I added the caramel and I flipped it upside down now for the count of 20. And then once I count to 20, which I've been talking, so it's probably 20, I'm going to sit it on my Silpat mat right side up again, so with the stick up. Before I do that, I just want to say I've got bubbles happening here. I'm not sure what that's going to do or look like in the end, but I'm not going to mess with it. I think it's just from the caramel sliding back and forth. So I'm going to sit it on my Silpat mat. While I'm talking about letting your apples drip, you know, most of us think that more is better, so like more caramel is better. That's actually not the case for caramel apples. So more is not better when it comes to caramel apples. That's why you want to let it drip, because if it drips off into your pan, then that's less that's going to slide off of your apple and get stuck to whatever you've got your apples resting on to cool. So as you can see, my caramel's not really sliding so much anymore, so I think I might need to heat it up again. I've done 4 of my apples and it's staying thick. It's not running back off the way I need it to. So I think I'm gonna heat it up just a little bit, let it cool back off again, and then do my remaining 2 apples. Cause see, I've got lines happening here, and it's too thick. It's not gonna do what I need it to do. Which my caramel is just too cool right now for it to slide back off. So I'm gonna heat my caramel up and then do my last 2 apples. Oh my god, look at how beautiful. Okay, seriously dudes, I have never had caramel apples turn out like this in my life. Oh my god, I'm so excited. So all of my apples are carameled now, so I'm gonna put them in the refrigerator and let them completely cool. You can let them cool on the counter, but in the refrigerator is best because it's gonna help to set the caramel even quicker. So I'm gonna put these in the fridge and let them cool for about 30 minutes. Okay, they've been chilling for about an hour. Look at how pretty they are. Oh my god, I'm so excited. I have never had caramel apples look like this. All the caramel stayed on top. I don't have a huge puddle underneath. Now the true test is going to be getting it off of the Silpat mat. So let's give it a pull and see what happens. Oh my god, like it just let go. Look at, ah! Oh my god, look at, like I'm one finger, did you see? Oh my god, look, look. Ah! Oh my god, I'm so excited. They're so pretty. So, quick tip while I have this one handy. So this is called the foot. So if it does run down like that and get a little puddle, this is a foot. You can actually smush this down if you don't want it on there and kind of flatten it out. I don't really care. It's compared to all of my other endeavors with caramel apples, these are gorgeous. So I'm not concerned with a foot, but you can squish it down and like smooth it out a little bit if you don't want that on there. Oh my god, I cannot believe they turned out so good. I'm so excited. So a couple of quick things that I just wanted to share. You can see it has, oh, I'm like in the, okay, sorry, the lighting, I can't get it right today. It's late in the evening now, the sun's going down, so I have no natural light. But you can see there's some air bubbles in here. Dude, compared to my other endeavors, I'm okay with bubbles. But what I did notice is that the hotter the caramel was, the more bubbles I had. So for example, the green apple, this was at, ooh, I'm out of focus. Focus, 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 okay. The green one, this was as the caramel was starting to cool, but you can see there's no bubbles. There's some lumps in it. It's not as smooth, but there's no bubbles. This one, smoother, but bubbles. Whatever, I don't even care. This is the best my caramel apples have ever turned out, and I have been making caramel apples for at least 15 years, so I'm super excited. The other thing that I wanted to say, like I said, I have notes here because I didn't want to forget anything. You want to let them cool completely. In the refrigerator is best, but you can cool them on the counter. The caramel just may not get quite as firm. And you need to store them, and you can store them at room temperature, but the caramel may start to slide, especially if your house is really warm. So storing them in the refrigerator is a really good idea. Once they're cool, like I said, you can squish that little foot down and then dip them into chocolate. If you're going to do chocolate, you do not want to dip hot caramel out. You don't want to dip Yeah, hot caramel apples into chocolate, because the caramel is just going to make the chocolate slide right off. So your apples need to be completely cool if you're going to coat them in chocolate after the caramel. However, if you're just going to do caramel and then roll them in nuts or sprinkles or Oreos or whatever, you only need to let them cool on the counter for about 10 minutes because you want the caramel to be warm enough that that stuff will all stick to it. So if you're just going from caramel to dipping it into something, cool for 10 minutes. If you're going from caramel to then coat it in chocolate, let it cool completely. And the caramel apples will last for 2 to 3 days. They don't tend to last very long, especially if you're storing them at room temperature. They will kind of go slimy sooner if you leave them at room temperature. Storing them in the fridge, you should get a good 3 days out of them. At this point, once they're nice and cool, you can wrap them in some sort of non-stick, either parchment paper or I guess cellophane would be okay, but the cellophane may stick because you can see, like, I don't know if you can see, but I'm leaving fingerprints. It's still tacky. It's not ever going to be like a candy coating. It's always going to be tacky. So, okay, so it is dessert time. We just finished dinner, which is why my kitchen is now a disaster. But I am getting ready to go enjoy my first caramel apple that's of the season that's perfect. Oh, I'm so excited. So I hope you enjoyed these tips. I hope you learned something, and I hope, I'm sorry, I have caramel on me. I hope you learned something, and I hope that it helps you to have your caramel stick to your apples. Another thing that you can do, if you don't have a Silpat mat, if you don't have parchment paper or don't want to use any of that, you can also use a cooling rack, like a cookie cooling rack with the little holes in it. You can invert the sticks through the holes so they'll stand this way into the cooling rack. If your sticks are a little bit too long, you can elevate the cooling rack, put the feet on something so that the holes aren't obscured. Is that the right word? Yeah. And stick the caramel apples down into the cooling rack to cool. That way they won't stick to anything. I'm so happy. I've never had caramel apples turn out this good. I'm so excited. Thank you so much for hanging with me today. Remember, if you enjoy what I do here, don't forget to hit the little subscribe button. That way you don't miss anything. And then share it with your friends. That way they can hang out with us too. Make sure you're getting the YouTube notifications, because if you don't see it on Facebook, YouTube will send you an email and let you know that I've posted a new video. All of the links for all the places that you can find me are in the down bar below. So clicky there, and then come hang out with me in those places. And that's it for today. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you next time. Bye! My caramel is melting. It's almost ready. So I have pulled my, no, let me say this. While my caramel is melting, just before you start working on your caramels, you want to prepare the surface that you're going to put your caramel apples on. I've always used wax paper, but every year without fail, my apples, I should have my face because I have a lot to say right now. Just before putting your caramels on to start melting, you want to prepare the surface that you're going to actually lay your apples on to cool after you put the caramel. Oh my god, I'm still wearing my glasses. Yes. I love you too. Love your tear. Babe, they came out perfect! Oh my god! Yes! They didn't stick. The caramel stuck to it. They're perfect. I'm so happy.